Hi, Tim. Welcome to the show.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for having me on. I
Uh,
really appreciate this.
it's my pleasure. My pleasure. I was on your website. I saw all kinds of interesting things there. We're going to be talking about one book. I guess you've only written one book so far.
I did. In a previous life, I wrote several books that were educational in nature, but now I've moved to the fictional world, and that's why you have me on today. So,
Okay, great.
yeah.
Well, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, your backstory, where you come from, and how you got to the point now where you've written this one fictional book?
It's quite the story. I would say that if you were going to describe me in one word, you'd describe me as a storyteller. I have a vivid imagination. I'm creative, and I just love to talk. As anyone who knows me will tell you, I probably talk too much. So anyway, I think many authors, like for example, you used to do a lot of mountain climbing, and that's when you wrote your first book in your series, The Way to Colorado. You write about things you know about. So back in the 80s, I was a personal trainer in the Hamptons, and I had access to a wide array of people. I would call them the one percenters, behind the hedgerows, south of the highway, as they say. These are the homes we drive by and look at and say, oh my gosh, I can only imagine. But what I found out was they're humans just like us. They have successes, they have failures, they have problems. Three of their children are wonderful, one has some issues. So, what I found out was a lot about human nature. And the other thing is, uh, they roll to a different the beat to a different drum. They have power, they have wealth, they have a sense of entitlement. Not all of them, but many of them. And it's interesting as an observer to watch how they treated each other, but also people they perceived as below them, if you will. So what I did was I was an observer, and I watched over the years when I was doing this, and what I did was I took a lot of and I would tell people some stories, but I never mentioned names, I never mentioned clients, but I would tell some stories, and I'd hear stories from massage therapists, from the pool guy, from other people I'd come in contact with living out in the Hamptons. And so what I did was I took some facts and I used my creative process and mixed it with some fiction to develop a tale that I felt would be engaging to a reader, entertaining to a reader. And I think if you do that as an author, you've got a pretty good book. But what I also did was I tried to take it one more step so that when someone's done reading my book, they think about their life. They reflect on how they treat people, how they were treated, how they look and treat people not like them. So I would hope at the end of the book they'd be entertained. There's wow moments where they're like, I can't believe this happened. There's other moments where they're angry at the protagonist, other moments where they feel sorry for the protagonist. But I would hope at the end of the day they think about human nature, temptations, how they handle them, the choices they've made in their lives. What if they had taken that job in their 20s instead of the one they did? What if they married that person instead of the one they did? And so I would hope they think about human nature, temptation, choices, and the consequences of their actions. And I don't want to give the book away, but what do you do if you get a second chance? What if you're lucky enough to get a redo? How do you handle that?
Mm.
So that's how I came to write the book. I'm one of those people that people see in the food store, or they see, when they walk down the block and I'm out there mowing the lawn, and they look right by them because they all think their life was so much more exciting than maybe mine because I don't flaunt it. I live well within my means and very calm, but I've had one heck of a ride in my early years of adulthood. I really have.
Yeah, I can see by the pictures that you've been around. You do some fishing, you do some acting, you work out, and you seem to have had a very full life. And I like the
Yes.
description of your book because that kind of social behavior has always been a fascination to mine. And especially these days, I observe how people are. And one of the things I learned was that in a hierarchical world that we do live in, to look down and say, well, I'm going to be nicer to the people below me because, I'm just going to be a nice person. We also have to be nice to the people above us as well, because we're all people, right?
Right. And that's what some people don't get is, we hear all this political stuff these days. It's pretty common sense. Who really cares what someone is? If they're a nice person, you treat them nice. If they're not such a nice person, you just don't deal with them.
Yeah,
So, but some people can do that. I do that. It sounds like you do that, but not everybody does that. We're very judgmental. And it's
yeah,
common to be judgmental. I mean, because it's a protective mechanism. But if more of us just loosened up and went with the flow and understood the dynamics, maybe we'd have some more empathy. Maybe we'd just move on and pick and choose our spots better.
yeah.
But
Everyone has a story, and everyone has what they say across the
and
barrel.
who better to write the story about you than yourself?
Yeah,
So the beginning of the book, the character in the book, the main character is Hunter McPherson, and the beginning of the book is pretty much me. And again, I don't want to give it away up until the point where he loses his mind one rainy afternoon with a character named Jacqueline. I'll just dangle that out there. But what I did was I grew up in Westchester County, New York, which is north of the city. It's I would say, a very affluent county in the United States. People who live there are like Alan Arkin used to live there. The Clintons lived there. Ex-Governor Cuomo lived there. So those types of people. But the town I'm from was Portchester, New York, and I would describe that as a very blue collar town. If somebody's father was a physician or mother, we thought they were the rich family. Everybody was hardworking. We had teachers, bakers, lawyers, a few doctors, people that keep the world running. And so when I got older in high school and college, I started lifeguarding at Oakland Beach, the best summers of my life. But I mixed with a lot of people from Harrison and Rye that were different than me, but I didn't realize it at the time. At the time, I just thought they were people. But when you go to parties and you looking back now that I'm more mature and older, and I look at how their parents treated us and how even they sort of treated us. I mean, it was like we all got along, but looking back, it was like, but you'll never be one of us. You'll never be one of us accepted into those higher things. So then when I got done there, I got a teaching job. I'm a phys ed teacher by education. And I got a job at a school district on Long Island. I went to a university to get my master's degree, and I got it in exercise physiology. And we've talked before, and you know I'm into exercise. That's probably why. And what happened was this other gentleman I worked with, who happened to be a fellow lacrosse player where I went to undergrad school and also a fraternity brother. He's the mad professor type. Wonderful guy, but it's just like, he's one of those mad professor types that everything's about that. But people loved him and trusted him, and he's brilliant. So he'd get a lot of inquiries to do things. I'm more pragmatic. I'm like, okay, here's how we can get it done. Here's how we can use it to our advantage. So we formed a company and we started doing training seminars for local health clubs. We wrote training manuals, like for the YMCA of America. We wrote all their training manuals back in the 80s. Johnson and Johnson came to us. They were selling wellness programs at the time to corporations, the same way they sold Band-Aids. We would go in and do staff training. We wrote those manuals. And then we got hired at a very exclusive health spa on the east end of Long Island. It was one of the six biggest spas in the world at the time. It was like Greenbrier, Baden-Baden, and it was called Gurney's Inn. And Gurney's Inn was an interesting place because it was owned by the mob. So sometimes when I'd show up for work, there were some interesting people there. And where you have mobsters, think of Vegas, you get celebrities. So there were a ton of celebrities coming through. They weren't the people with the money. The people with the money were the people with homes in Palm Beach and Manhattan and the Hamptons and Switzerland, and how many houses is enough. So I was around all these people that I never grew up with. And here I am in my 20s, and it's like crazy. And it's the 80s, and discos are in, and people are doing cocaine like you can't imagine. And AIDS is wiping out the gay population. So it was crazy times. So this woman approached me, and she said, I'd like you, if you want to be my private trainer. She was an ex-model. She was in her 50s. She was just the nicest person in the world. And she had a home in the Hamptons. So I said, sure, I'd be interested in trying that. So one thing led to another. And within about 2 years, I was working 40 hours a week with private training. I left the university. I still did the consulting with my friend because we could work that out. And I was just meeting all types of people. So I condensed them in the book. I made all the trust fund people one character, the Stanwicks. I made all the social climbers who had to be at the right party and rub elbows with the right person and get that picture taken to put an L and W. I made them the Stevensons. So I could compare and contrast different types of people, at the same time protecting my clients, because I don't want someone saying, that's me he's writing about. But there were enough similarities I could do it. So that's what I did, and that's how I understand who these people are. I mean, I'm at a house one day, and I'm exercising. I got to tell this story because it just sums it up. I'm exercising with this woman in her house, in her bedroom. The bedroom's bigger than my house. Back then, you had the push button phones. Her husband's screwing around. I know it. She knows it. He knows it. Everybody knows it. And the phone rings, and she shoots off that floor, and she hits the button, and she goes, hello. And I start laughing internally because they have like three servants that are there full time. They answer phones and doors. But she went there because she probably figured the girlfriend was calling while she was in an exercise session. She goes like this: oh, hold on, Mr. President, I'll get him. Clicks off one, hits on two, and she says to her husband, I won't use his name, I'll use your name. She says, John, Ronnie's on line one. So these are the type of people, it was Reagan, these are the types of people I'm dealing with. Jimmy and Rosalind Carter had lunch at a house one day. The Secret Service delayed me entering for the exercise session. So I was just in a whole different realm. And I was able to write about it, I think, in a way that people will find engaging and entertaining. And and then there were some crazy things too. I had a dominatrix as a client. I had a woman who was a sales rep for sex toys. So I wove that into the book because the book is sort of like on Apple TV Plus, that show called The Morning Show. It's
Yeah.
really about Matt Lauer. Well, he lives in East Hampton, of course he does.
Yes.
And Epstein, which isn't a pretty story, but people are intrigued by that. They won't admit it in public, but they read about it and they find it
Yeah.
fascinating. The
Yeah.
book's sort of between those two because that stuff really exists out there,
Wow.
you know.
Hmm. Geez, I'm thinking about my life and rock and roll and touring and
Well, you're a Renaissance man, John. You've
well,
written books,
you're
music, you're a
yeah,
hiker.
but some of the things that you experienced, I didn't experience them. Uh, Pretty
Yeah.
cool. Very cool.
Yeah. And that's why I say when people see me, they just think, oh, that's Tim. He was a phys ed teacher.
Yeah.
I'm so much more exciting and important. And I just laugh because I got away unscathed. So instead of doing the coke and doing everything like so many others, I just bought drip stocks and bought real estate in East Hampton. And that's why I'm comfortable now writing books, I
Yeah.
guess.
Don't do
So
drugs, kids.
no, don't do drugs.
Don't do drugs.
There's no upside.
That's right. So obviously, you're going to uncover some of the dark sides of what you saw, fictionally speaking, of course.
Of
And
course.
you were hoping that no one would recognize themselves in the book. And has that been successful so far?
Yeah, it has. A lot of them have passed away. But yes, it has, because I was really careful about that. But I can describe estate areas. I can describe what the lawns look like, what the cutting gardens look like, what,
Okay.
different types of houses. And there were so many like that that it would be hard pressed. And I, at the end of the day, I'm a good guy. I don't want to put somebody on the spot. So everything in the book um, didn't happen to me, but it could have absolutely happened, or it happened to somebody else that I knew,
Yeah.
like a massage therapist that I, overlapped with on, or something like that.
Yeah.
So there's nothing definitive that happened with a client, but it's out there. And what's interesting, and I didn't even think of this going into it, but it's been interesting. Anybody from what we call the tri-state area, like New York, New Jersey, Manhattan, Long Island, their comments have been, Tim, you are spot on. People from the Midwest, they're a little put off by some of the scenes in the book. They're like, you know, but then when I explain to them, when I talk to a book clubber like to you today, and I say, listen, think about the Epstein story, think about the morning show. If you watch that show on Netflix, Royal Pains, which was on a streaming show for you, then you can appreciate that, yeah, this stuff really goes on behind the privet hedges, behind the hedgerows, south of the highway. And it probably goes on other places as well too.
Oh, it
So
does. It does.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So but I have very positive things in the book too. It's there's good things about this person and this character too. But he's forced to make decisions, and so how does he handle them? And I had one woman say, and I thought this was really kind of interesting at a book club. She said, to be so young and to be around what you were around, it's really amazing you were able to keep it together, you know. And I don't know, maybe I'm lucky, or maybe it's just not who I am, maybe, to cross some of those lines and stuff. Because once you cross them, it's hard to come back.
Well, I find that you're probably pretty disciplined in how you approach life.
Right,
You
right.
went through university, you got a master's degree. You're not about to start messing that up. But at the same time, you're observant and you know these things go on. Did how much of it did actually bother you, or were you just observing and that's all you were doing?
I think I was more amazed.
Mm-hmm.
You ever see something that you can't unsee?
Yeah.
That's the problem for me. This is like a therapist now. My problem is I've seen things that I can't unsee or
Mm-hmm.
forget. It didn't impact my life um, in a negative way, but wow, I think I was just more wow, like this is
Sure.
insane. Some things bothered me though. I mean,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
bothers me when people aren't treated right.
Yeah. Well, as a phys ed teacher, you're focused on your physical body and that's your goal, that's your
Right, I
direction.
was more fitness oriented than
Right,
sport.
fitness oriented.
I
So
was
when drugs come along, that doesn't jive
right.
with fitness.
Right, I try
Whereas
to
if you're
lead
into
by
rock and roll
example.
music like I was, you think
Yeah,
it's part
wild
of it.
time.
You got to
It
do it. You're an
is.
actor,
It is. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
Speaking of which, you say you do some acting. You want to talk about that a little bit?
So, along the way, when my wife and I were starting to talk about retirement, um, we started thinking, where could we go during retirement and be snowbirds? Being Canadian, you can relate to that word, I'm sure. So, my son, who was a very good lacrosse player in high school and he played college as well, we took one last family vacation because I knew he was going to have to start going to all these recruiting camps and stuff. And he said, "Let's go to Costa Rica." He was a big surfer. I remember Costa Rica. I had to look it up on a map. So we went, the three of us, and we had such a great time that my wife and I ended up buying a condo down there. And we thought that would be where we'd do something bold and different. In the winters, we'd get away and go to Costa Rica. And so we got approached from a realtor one day to be on House Hunters International. And we said, sure, we'll do that. So we auditioned and we did that in Costa Rica, you know, and I loved the process. I just thought, wow, being in TV, that everything you see on TV, it's shot out of sequence, it's edited, it's what I love is I knew what happened in those 2 weeks we filmed, and then I saw the story they told when they reduced 60 hours of filming to what, 24 minutes or something. So I said, I got to get in on this when I retire. And the director said to me, she goes, you should get into this when you retire, because she said people do two things on camera traditionally. One is they freeze, and the other is they overact. And she goes, you're
Mhm.
just yourself. You're just natural. And I remember saying to her, I go, well, if we screw it up, we can just refilm it, right? It's like no big deal. And she goes, it's a great attitude. Just so you go with it. And so I retired a couple of years later. And for a variety of reasons, we sold Costa Rica and we bought in Sarasota. But what I did was I got an agent and I started doing infomercials and I started doing student films and I started being an extra on featured films. And I just absorbed and learned as much as I could. And when I'd be on a set, like for a feature film where everybody else sits around and they're kind of insecure and they talk about, oh, I just did this, I did that, I did this. I would go over and ask the assistant director, do you mind if I stand here? I won't bother you, but I want to hear the discussions taking place so I can learn. And every one of them, to a person, said, not a problem. They loved it. So then sometimes they'd throw me in as a featured extra, because they appreciated what I was trying to do.
Mhm.
So now I've moved more. I think my niche is doing TV commercials. And I've done some national ones, Balsam Hill Christmas trees. I was grandpa on Baby Alive
Hmm.
for Hasbro. I just did my biggest job this past weekend. I cannot talk about it, but it'll be out May 6th. It's for soft drink company. Going to be a great ad, I think.
Cool.
So that's a national one. But I've done some regional ones. I've done some local ones, and no job is too big or too small. I just love doing it because I
Yeah,
learn. Like when we do this, it's a reflective process. I'll watch
for
this and
sure.
I'll learn, and I'll be better the next time. And so,
Yeah.
so I got into the acting, and it's been neat because I meet people very different than what I had in my other life, and so I guess I like people, and
Excellent. When did you write your book?
I started the book probably a good 15 years ago. And back then, what you would do is you write a book and you'd send a synopsis or a query letter, they called it, with 3 chapters to an agent. And if you were lucky, you got a response, a form letter in 12 weeks saying no. So I did that. I was sending them out by the hundreds, and the book was terrible. But because just that the plot was, I didn't have it as tight as it is now. And what happened, but who knew? Now I know. So what happened though is 3 people, and I was sending it to mostly New York agents because I figured they had a house in the Hamptons, so they'd be able to relate. 3 people said to me, you have the people, places, and attitude of that time period down pat, but you need to work on the story. But I viewed that as a win. I viewed that as positive. Keep going. You got to be persistent if you're gonna achieve music or anything
Anything.
arts related.
Absolutely.
And you got to have thick skin because you're gonna hear people don't like it more than they do like it.
Yeah.
So and I have thick skin. So what I did was I put it down for a couple of years, but I always thought about it. And when COVID came and everything slowed down, my wife and I were talking, and she said, you really ought to finish that book because you put so much time in on it. This would give you something to do now that we're inside more and life
Mm.
has slowed down. So I finished it. And what I did was I was going to self-publish it, and I'll tell you why in a second. And I said, to get it to an agent, what I don't think people realize is for every book sent to agents, about 1% get accepted. And then that 1% is part of the 60 million books that are out there. It's hard to sell books. It's
Yes.
hard to get your story heard. So I wrote it. And what I did was I got an editor, a professional editor, a woman, Susan Jewett, who my wife knew from golf, who just happens to live in the same development as we do. And this is what she does for a living in
Hmm.
retirement. She was an English teacher and she's excellent at what she does. And she's no nonsense, which is what you need because you need to hear it the way it is. And she had some good input. But what was really cool was she got excited when she started reading this book. I would get emails from her at like 2:30 in the morning
Hmm.
that she was into it. And that's a good sign.
It
And
is.
then what she did, and she does with all her books, is she put it out to 4 beta readers. These are people who just read incessantly. They read every and anything. One woman was 80 something years old, and she's like, I don't know, there's some spicy scenes in this book. I don't know how it's going to go with her. And the woman came back and said, boy, have I lived a sheltered life, but man, I loved reading about it. So that was a win, right?
Good, yeah.
Another guy read it. He couldn't put it down. He read it in a day and a half and he just loved it for different reasons. So here's a woman, here's a man. That's good that both genders are into this. One woman read it and she couldn't get through it. And she said, I just don't like reading about rich people that are being nasty to other people. I'm just not into that. I could
Yeah.
care less about it. And so that's fine because you're not going to reach everybody. And then the fourth person suggested that we switch around a couple of chapters at the beginning. I didn't have to rewrite them. I mean, I had to change a line or two, but it wasn't anything major. But just restructure the order, and it was a stroke of brilliance.
Hmm.
And it really brought the reader in quicker and really asked some questions, if you will. The hook, it set the hook deeper. And so that was the critical part of, I think, the mistake most authors don't do is they don't take that extra step and really seek outside advice from someone who reads a lot of books and sees pitfalls. She cleaned the language up. That wasn't an issue. The grammar. Actually, I was pretty good on that. But because I think in my previous life I've written so much, and the other thing is I read a lot of novels, fictional novels. So
Yeah.
by doing that, I think I know what sounds normal, like
Yeah.
what's right. I look at a sentence, I go, no, that's not right.
Hmm.
Just because I read so much.
Right.
So anyway, what I did was I self-published it through booklocker.com because I'm not getting any younger. And my end game is by putting it in a book form, I have a body of work that I can send to film, TV people, or decision makers, and
Hmm.
say, I want to take this book to the screen or the streaming network. They get hit with 20 of those a day, maybe
Yeah.
more.
I
It's a
bet.
piece of paper, and they're like, yeah, okay, I've heard this idea. But what I did is, and I have some contacts that can put me in touch with decision makers. It's still a hard fight,
Yeah.
but I have a tangible piece of work. So what it says to them is this guy isn't a fly by night. He took the time, he can think it through, he perseveres, he's got a body of work. The second thing it does is it's copyrighted and it's registered with the Library of Congress, so it protects me on
Hmm.
intellectual property.
Okay.
And I did that instead of going the route of the agents again because I'm 70. I don't have that much time left to wait 5, 6 years for an agent to take and another 3 to 4 years to try to get it out there. So that's why I self-publish it. I don't sell it out of my car. I don't have copies around my house. I'm not, if I go to a book fair at an independent bookstore, they order the books and sell them. I'm not carrying boxes in.
Right.
So I'm trying to do it the right way. I'm trying to give back to independent bookstores. I'm trying to help the publisher out. Of course, Amazon's where most books are sold, but trying to help everybody out.
Yeah.
So that's when I wrote it. I finalized it. It came to answer your question. Came back out in June. So
June of
it's still
2023.
yeah. So it's
Right.
still finding its way, but it's timeless. It's set in the
Hmm.
'70s. I'm sorry, the '80s. 1987, one summer in 1987. So it's kind of timeless. I do have it in an independent bookstore in East Hampton, and I have it in two independent bookstores here in Sarasota. And one keeps selling out, which is good, and he's been wonderful. It's the Island Bookshop. I'm going to give him a shout out. Michael and Amy are wonderful, and they've really helped me, given me some marketing tips and stuff. You got to be on social media.
Yeah.
You got to be on so. And now I went down the rabbit hole on book talk and TikTok, and I'm telling you, there's a whole nother world out there. Maybe that's the next book, but I'm just having fun with it,
Yeah.
and it's a big learning curve. So it's fun.
So the book takes place in 1987,
Mhm.
and life was very different back then. You and I both experienced it.
Right.
I write differently. I write sort of fantasies in different worlds that don't exist, so I can make up my own rules. But if you're going to write something from the 80s, you have to keep it 80s style. How did you find that was that challenging? Because people didn't have cell phones, there was no social media.
Right,
It was the
right.
80s.
The rich had cell phones, but they
Okay.
looked like sat phones. They were huge, right? They were boxy. You keep it in the car and a kit. But you're right. So in the thing, Hunter goes to a park in East Hampton, and he uses the payphone to call this other guy. And so you have to think of things like that. Um, Certain airlines weren't out in business then, so you had to dial that back. Um, and certain nightclubs were there then, they're not there now. So I changed the names of a lot of stuff. But yes, you're right. I wouldn't say it was problematic, but you have to think your way through that, because you're right. Certain things didn't exist back then. We've had a lot of technology changes. The editor was also really good on that. She caught one thing, and I can't remember what it was, but it was a good catch. Um, and some of the magazines that were out then in the social world, they're not
Mhm.
in business anymore. So to your point, yeah, you got to be careful when you go back. You got to research that and see when did a cell phone come out. And it may not be when you thought it did.
Exactly.
Sometimes it was earlier,
Yeah.
but not always. So
Yeah.
yeah,
80s is historical fiction now.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, just different times. So.
So it only was that one year. I mean, it's one book, so it takes
Yeah, it
place
happens.
in that
What
one year.
happens is it happens in the course of the summer. The book starts off in June, and the book reaches a climax in September.
Okay.
So Memorial Day through Labor Day is when it's big in the Hamptons.
Okay.
It's the season, if you will.
Yeah.
And I worked all those in because their language is different there. It's south of the highway is one word. It runs together in a breathy sentence. They must learn that at finishing school. So good to see you. Kiss on each cheek, but don't really touch the cheek.
Right.
You'll mess the
Right.
makeup
Yeah.
up. So I had fun with it because on some levels it's pretty shallow, the behaviors.
Hmm.
But on other levels, it's very real. And again, I don't want to give stuff away in the book, but there's some funny things. But I think if anybody's been out there, they'll really relate. They'll go, "Yeah, that's man, he's right. That's how they behave. That's how they act and stuff." I also did something else in the book that's very unique in terms of writing. So usually people write in the first person or third person. I didn't do that. What I did was, um, and I'm not giving anything away by saying this, but um, Hunter is Hunter's now Hunter after everything that happened, Hunter took off. Okay. So the book is set in the Hamptons, but it's also set in Costa Rica because I had intimate knowledge of Costa Rica, having lived there with the condo I mentioned before for a couple of years. So I worked that in. And a lot of the feedback I got was, boy, you really describe the Hamptons well. I know exactly where that street is. I grew up near there in Westchester County. I used to go to that bar. You're talking about this bar, right? I changed the name, but I'm like, yeah, that's the bar. And then it's the same thing with Costa Rica. So what I did was I have this woman go and basically act as a reporter and interview Hunter now as an adult for a week straight. And he tells his story to her. Sometimes it's like he's telling her what happened, and other times it almost feels as if it's happening right before your eyes as the reader. But what she does is he's the protagonist, and she sets him up with questions, same questions you as a reader would ask. So, like, he'll be answering, and you're like, well, I wonder why I did that. And she'll be like, well, why did they do that? And he'll answer that. So it's kind of an interview process. And throughout the time that she's interviewing him, she goes through different emotions of, uh, really liking him, really looking at who is this guy, being angry with him, liking him again. So the book evokes emotions. And I think as readers, we're going to look at people and say, God, I've done some things in my life that I wish I hadn't. I
Mm,
wish I had a redo.
mm.
What do you beat yourself up over it for eternity or other people, or do you at some point let go and realize human nature is to make some poor choices along the way? Hopefully you make more better ones than poor. So I wrote it from that perspective of an interview, and that's a different twist on the story too, but I think it works really well for this story, you
Right.
know.
Right.
She's the reader. She's the liaison between Hunter and the reader.
Hmm.
Her name is Melanie. Yeah.
Now that you've poured yourself completely into this book, do you see yourself writing another one?
I have some ideas. Always have ideas. I run the beach a couple of mornings a week. I ride my bike a couple of afternoons a week, and no phone, no music, just my head is wide open and stuff pops in. So I have some ideas. But it's a big, I don't think people realize, like everybody says, oh, when I retire I'm going to write a book. You gotta really work at it to make it right. It doesn't just happen, or at least for me, and I
Right.
think most people, it doesn't just flow. Some people, they turn them out like Stuart Woods. He turns out 3 a year, but they're pretty much the same. But it yeah, I've got some ideas. We'll see where it goes. I don't know. I want to get this one moving in the right direction
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
If it becomes successful and it goes, then I'll do another one. And so
Sure.
because the enjoyment I get out of the book, you're never going to get rich off writing a book unless you're some like Patterson or something. But I get enjoyment when someone, like the other day, this was classic. I'm riding my bike, and this guy who I know because I play golf with him a couple of times a week flags me down. He's like, Tim, I just finished your book. Come here. You got to talk to me, man. Where did this woman come from? This character, how did you come up with her? Is she real? And so if I can engage people and entertain them and get them all charged up, and if they're having fun with it, and they're thinking and their emotions are running wild, then I've done my job as an author. That's pretty cool. And so I feel good about that. So for me, that's where the enjoyment comes from, is when someone
Yes,
reaches
sir.
out to me or they write a review and they
Yeah.
say, I didn't like this, but boy, this. So, that's fine. So, yeah,
Yes. Yeah. You know,
yeah. But
I
that was
get great
special.
I get great pleasure when people talk to me about characters in my books, and we're talking about fictitious people and they want to know
Right.
more about them. Like we're talking about someone who doesn't even exist. This is so cool.
I made it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when no matter how fictitious a person is, you probably compiled a couple of
Yeah.
personalities into that person
Yeah.
to make them the way they are.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So
so your book has been out for about a year now. What are sales like for you?
I know what the publisher's selling because that comes in monthly, but I really don't know. And for those who are listening, don't know, Ingram is the distributor to Barnes and Nobles, Books a Million, Amazon, and everybody else, independent bookstores, everybody. So it's hard to tell what the real numbers are. So I don't really focus on a number. I just look at keep the ball rolling, keep the ball rolling. As I get more views on all the social media stuff, hopefully that translates into more book sales and all. Amazon gives you a weekly report. I, I'm not putting all I trust in those numbers because sometimes I know books sold and they're not reporting it that week. So I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
So anyway, I'm happy with it. Whatever
Mm.
I sell, and I I don't know what's good. I mean, everybody inflates their numbers and does it, but I'm happy with what I'm doing,
Sure.
and I think talking to other authors, it's realistic. Sometimes on Amazon, my number's high. Sometimes the number gets really, when I say high, I mean it's sometimes it's low. It's lower is better, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes it's higher. It can really fluctuate hundreds of thousands of places, and that's probably two book sales because they're dealing with 60,000 books, right? There's 60
Yeah.
million books. So I'm in the top 2%.
Hmm.
Is that good? I guess.
Sounds
Sounds
good.
good. But then
Sounds
when
good.
you look at numbers, I don't know if it's good. So
Sure.
it's hard. I think you write the book, the thing people need to tell you, write it for yourself and your enjoyment and something you wanted to do. Don't go into it thinking this is gonna be your life, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So
I can see back there that you have your website posted.
I I
Throughout this.
do. Right. So it's timothykentsmith.net. You asked me before we went on the air, do you want to be called Timothy or Tim? Everyone knows me as Tim Smith, but here's the problem. If you go on social media and you Google Tim Smith, you'll get
Mhm.
about 7,500 people.
Yeah.
If you go to Timothy Kent Smith, you'll get about three people. One's a
Okay.
doctor, there's me, and there's this other guy.
Okay.
So that's why, and that's my given name, but that's why I go with that. And I get asked that a lot of time. Oh, what are you? You're an author now. You're stuffy, but that's why I did it. But people can go to my website. There's a whole bunch of stuff relative just to find out what's going on with the acting. I post auditions. I don't post the audition, but um, who I got auditioned asked to audition for, who was submitted to, what's currently running. And so information like that, who my agents are, they can see photos of things I've done or audition photos. There's a gallery in there. They can look. I have a blog. I put a lot of the stuff I put on social media. I put on the blog. It's different people search different ways. And I have a monthly newsletter I do. It goes out by email. I never spam. I never share emails. And I talk sometimes about behind the scenes stuff. So I'll put some photos in from behind the scenes on a shoot if the shoot doesn't mind that. I'll put in what's going on latest with the books, what bookstores are carrying it. I'm at this book fair. Come see me. Oh, this commercial was dropped. So they look at that. I'll put this show on there so people can see it. And it
Oh,
just connects everybody. It comes out the first of every month. I get some people right back, but most people when they see me, they'll say, "Man, I love that," but they don't actually, write back to you and give you immediate feedback. But people find it interesting. Where I used to teach, people the faculty room loves the first of the month because they sit there and they go, man, I can't believe this is
mm,
the guy we used to work alongside and teach, and they have fun with it. So it's been positive. But so I do that once a month and it comes out by email. It's free. So if people go to the website, they can sign up for it. Just send me, I don't need your address and everything, just give me your name and your email and say want a free copy once a month. I'll add you to the list and we'll send it out. So
okay. I'll be
yeah,
one of those people. I like
all
reading
right.
people
It'll
enjoy.
give you a grin. I keep it light. It's usually pretty funny and stuff.
Good.
So
Good stuff.
yeah, yeah.
Well, Tim, how about you give us one final pitch, talking to the people who are watching this episode and trying to convince them that your book is worth buying. I think it is. I think it's a great story. So what do you have to
Yeah.
say about that?
Well, I would say if you like rich people, in seeing what they get into and how their lifestyle is, and you like human nature and temptations and a little bit of spice along the way, this would be a great book for you to read. And they can get it at booklocker.com/12864. That'll take you right to the publisher's website, and they can get it in any online bookstore. And if they're going to do that and order it as an ebook or paperback, I would urge them, go to your favorite local independent bookstore. They need you. And we as communities need them
Yeah.
because they're gathering places to share ideas. And it's just independent bookstores are a dying breed, but
Mm,
they're important. So it's a great, I would say this, it's a great summer beach read. It's a quick read. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll twitch. It'll evoke emotion, but you'll be entertained.
good. Just in time for
Uh,
the summer too. It's coming right around the corner.
right. We kind of missed the date with the release date. There was it got held up a little bit. And so this summer, I'm hoping to have a push like in June, which would be great. So
Okay.
yeah, or try to get a push out there and see
All
how
right.
it goes. So,
Sounds great.
yeah.
All right, Tim. It has been a pleasure speaking with you and
Yeah,
hearing
John,
your
I can't
working.
thank you enough. This was great and very your personality. It's very easy to do this. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you
And
for your kind words.
yeah.
And you take care
So
of yourself, and I
all
wish you
right.
all the success.
All right. You too, John. I appreciate it. Thank you so, so much. Take care.
Thank you for watching. If you like what I do here on Tell Me About Your Book, then please consider hitting that like button and leaving a comment. You can also subscribe and ring that bell because I release 2 episodes per week, one on Wednesdays and one on Saturdays. And if you are an author, I would love to hear from you. Until such time, keep on writing and be kind to one another.